everybody. I'd like to call to order the Assembly SAP Review Committee meeting, and I'd like to start with introductions.
Alden Thurn, Deputy CFO.
That'll be Craig Jackson.
Jennifer Johnson.
Pete Peterson.
Amy Demosky.
Dick Trey. Mike Schneider.
Mike, please join us.
Rose Foley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
And Zig, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great, great. Okay. Progress report. Alden, you have the floor.
Well, first I want to thank Ms. Demboski because my child is in the government class and she's actually been to the Assembly and to the Eagle River Community Council. So she's like, I see that lady every single place I go. I said, well, she's involved in every committee that we can find. So one way or the other, we're going to get our 10 hours of community service out of her. But she remarked that she was there on Tuesday night. So the first thing I want to do is I want to thank you for the positive vote on Hanahek and AMS on Tuesday night. That's real important to our timeline. In fact, it was the most critical point of meeting our deadlines as we're moving forward here. So I'm basically just going to kind of give some updates on all the things that we're working on and answer some questions. As always, I don't do PowerPoints because as soon be honest and say to you as we're doing these things. So the contracts are being worked on, now that it's been approved, and those have to be rushed through here pretty quickly because we have a very tight timeline to be able to get all that work done. So the SAP people, as you're aware, are up here and they're working with purchasing and Troy from the IT department to try to get all those things dotted and signed here very quickly. We have a target for them to have the version 7 of the system ready on March 1st. That is our date that we put on the map, that they have to be able to get that done. So we're getting those contracts signed, and then they will bring in some resources, pull up, because remember, we have a configured system. It's been configured a lot. It hasn't been configured correctly, but we have a starting point, and that's in version 5 right now. And what we're trying to do is move that to version 7, because just like PeopleSoft, those versions haven't been kept up with throughout this 3 or 4 year process, just like PeopleSoft hasn't been kept up for the 12 or 15 year process. So that's what they're going to focus on right now, is taking that configured database system and moving it from version 5 of SAP to version 7. And that targeted date, what all that work that was approved, is to put it off-site, because we don't have the capability of doing it here, get the resources, the skilled labor to be able to do it in a time frame, because internally it was going to take us 9 to 10 months. They've committed to a 3-month timeline to make that happen, which is what gets us to our March 1st deadline.
If you can pause for a moment, Mr. Training had a question.
I can wait till he's done. I just want to
thank
get in
you.
line so I can ask you a question.
You're in line.
And then the HANA one was just to get the entire infrastructure of all of our products in the SAP thing, and that uplift license to be able to do that. But that is our focus, because that is, and what that means conversely is the blueprinting. That is our February 29th is our target. So we have 2 dates that we're targeting here. We need that database and that configured system ready to go with the blueprinting at that exact time. So that's the target date that I'm shooting for, is that March 1st timeline. That's why it was so important to be able, because otherwise we might have blueprinting done but not a system to work on it, and then you have a pause in there, not a good pause, because you have consultants that want to be working. I want to try to keep this timeline on this train going consistently, so that's why we had to get those 2 things targeted at that point, and why it was so important to be able to get that through. If you have a question on this particular one, I have
It's a whole system, but let me start off.
Okay.
Desktops.
Okay.
As you know, when you've got version 7 working, you're on your machine, you want to get into SAP. I want to know exactly how many machines we have are not compatible with version 7. So that will require the IT person to tell us at the next meeting. I want to know how many desktops are not going to be functional, because I appreciate they're going to have a date of 1 March. But if the desktop doesn't communicate with SAP, you might as well not have spent all this money.
Okay.
And I need to know how much money we're talking about to get the operating system, so that we can get every desktop hooked in.
So yes, Mr. Train, that's exactly true, but 2 different things that we will absolutely have to happen when we go live, and I'm still targeting July of 17 as my current target for that, and then all Munis employees who access SAP have to have a machine to be able to do that. The March date is for when we're going to be able to, we don't know what vendor it'll be yet, because that's the process that I'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit, that is going to take that blueprinting and that aired configured system from all these prior ones, and that's when they're gonna have a realization period where that's gonna be off-site. So a lot of Muni staff won't be necessarily needing computers to be testing at that particular point in time period. But yes, you are absolutely correct. At the very end of the project, we have to have thousands of.
I've just done this sort of thing before with the military, and if you don't set a target date ahead of time, it's gonna creep up, you're gonna go live, and the system's gonna be done.
And the cost is gonna be substantial, because we're talking probably a couple thousand computers.
A lot of money.
Yes.
Other thing would be, let's see. That's fine, I think we've got it all covered.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer. I'd just like to take a moment and recognize that Mr. Steele just joined us, and Ms. Fleet, the Mayor's Chief of Staff, has joined us. Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you say, once we get the blueprint and stuff, you don't know which vendor it's gonna be to take it, is that going out to competitive bid, or how are we gonna determine?
Well, as you remember, hopefully from the external committee's recommendation document that was done at the end of September, their preference at that point was to try to work an agreement with SAP to take over and be able to do that. However, they also said in there, if you can't reach financial / scope an agreement on that, that we would put it out for a competitive RFP bid at that point in time. But the recommendation was for us to start trying to get it with SAP. And I actually have a little update on that coming here. I've got about 10 more items, but that speaks to that particular.
That segues right into my next question. So if you want to give us the update on the SAP contract, you more than welcome. So that's my question.
For that particular.
That's
All right.
literally my
Before you
question.
start-
Actually, I'll wait.
No way, Thompson? Okay.
Maybe I'll get through all the
I
items
mean, I have
and-
about 4 questions, but that was going to be my next question for
Okay,
you.
well, maybe I can get through all the things and then we can kind of go back, or would you like to just go one a topic at a time? I'd be more than happy.
Well,
Hannah,
I don't know what your topics are, so I mean, I can give you my topics, and if they're in your
Okay.
thing, I'll wait.
Sure.
So, number one, when you said which vendor you weren't sure, it kind of surprised me, because I was thinking it was gonna be SAP, but I'll just go on the record right now saying, I won't vote for Black and Beach. I'm just putting that on the record, right now.
You'll have company, okay?
So, just saying.
And I'm just covering myself by saying, as I said, that we're working towards SAP right now, but we're not holding ourselves hostage to
Sure.
one vendor.
Oh, and that's fair. I
Before
think-
we continue, I have a suggestion, okay? Why don't you go through each point, and then when you're done with each point, I'll see if anybody has any questions, because I think it'll be more orderly that way.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Boss, is that okay? Okay.
So just kind of highlight, first, thank you for Hanaheck AMS. That's how it impacts the entire timeline, is that March 1st particular day. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was blueprinting, and where we're at on that, and that kind of ties to our consultants. We're pretty much fully, as you know, when we lost about a third of the consultants during the pause, and it took us some time to get back up again. We have a couple of areas in the finance that we do not have people yet. But for the vast majority of the areas, including FERC, which is, I know one you probably heard about with utilities, that's a very specialized skill set. We've had a gentleman up here for several weeks now working on that. So I would say we're missing only 1 or 2 consultant areas that we have not addressed. Otherwise, we're fully staffed. Have been delivering to Zig, and hopefully Zig can concern the burn rate that I know everybody has been hearing of. So Zig gets that I just started that this week, and he's got the entire 4 weeks since we started back up. So that information is coming as well. But we are pretty much fully staffed and going. Now we are entering holidays, and as we expected, that was going to be difficult for both consultants and for Muni to be able to do that. But from a staffing standpoint, we're looking very good. I would say we got some extremely high quality ones compared, I know, to some of the prior years. We've pretty much focused on SAP and Peloton as the resources. We have 1 Oxford only remaining. Otherwise, they're all in those. And all the key top areas are all SAP driven personnel that are coming in there. And I mean, we have 1 for time management that we actually went to the president of SAP to get her time allocated to the meeting. That took a lot of heavy lifting, and I hope what people are seeing from that is the commitment on both sides to try to come up with good staff to move this project, because they've seen the years of that it's taken to get here. So that's positive. But as far as blueprinting is going, we've taken some time here to look at our processes and our procedures, and on Monday we're going to be able to put out a new, here's what our landscape is to be able to, we all know our time, we know our timeline, February 20, I got an extra day this year from leap year. So February 29th is coming, and we're gonna be able to document where we're at currently, both in FILO and HCM. We're going to be able to actually break down into which types of documents, which we've never really done before. It's kind of been a macro level, and we didn't know, some of them are more important than other ones, and we're going to be able to do that. And then we're also going to show a trend of what we expect to get done and how well we're doing. Are we exceeding it, or are we not exceeding that, so people can see, as we talked about the burn rate, how well are we doing? And that's some information we haven't been able to present in the past, and Zig will be able to have that information as well. So I'm it's taken us a little while to get back up here again, but I think you're going to see it you're going to see it in a different format, and that's why I'm bringing it up right now, because you may have seen this information before. You say, well, we had 300 documents, and now we've got 500. Why is there a difference? And I'll walk through what we've done and why there's some changes and some things that we've identified. But once we fix that new way of doing it, then that's the way I'm going all the way through the process. And on a weekly basis, we're going to be able to report how well we are compared to but we also have an end date that we have to shoot for, and that's what the expectations are on that. So when you see, and I've talked to Zig about this as well, the blueprinting numbers, the way they're going to be shown are going to be a little bit different, but that's our process. We have new leadership on that site because Tom is gone and Jim is in there, but that's where we're kind of working towards. Are there any blueprinting questions?
Any questions? Okay, thank you, please continue.
Okay. I want to bring up leases because leases always, I just anticipate that, so I thought I'd just put leases on here. We are in the Sunshine Building, first and third floor. Lease is still going. We've probably got 25 consultants over there on any given day, so that is still going on. The apartment leases, where we've had consultants sharing apartments, we've had some single apartments, those leases will run out at different times throughout the month of December. And then we are going to get out of the lease business, at least during the winter cycle. If we get into the summer again, when hotel rooms are tight, we may have to, we got to put them someplace. But we're going to be getting out of that. We've the SAP and Peloton, because we didn't do it, actually went to the Hilton and Sheraton and negotiated extremely competitive winter. It's $89, I think, a night for them, and they're both competing against each other. And we're going to be doing hotel rooms as much as we possibly can going forward, at least through the winter process and definitely through blueprinting. But for the vast majority of the apartment leases, those will be expiring as they are. A few of the consultants want to stay there, and if that's the case, they'll work with SAP and Peloton to do their month-to-month leases and their bills. But we've been told that the rates will be even cheaper than the hotel rooms if they do it that way. But we'll at least get out of the leaseholding kind of mentality and aspect of that. But I know leases come up, but that's the apartments and the Sunshine Building.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, please continue.
Okay. The gate check. There was a lady up here, Lynn. Her name is Ketchy. She was here in July, and if you remember when we did the external advisory committee report on that day, I also released the gate check from SAP at that same day. Some of you got it as you were running out. That basically, this lady comes in, she's like an independent SAP third-party internal auditor, so to speak, saying, how's SAP doing, how are we doing, and identified all the different concerns. They were here in 2012, and everything was red, concerns everywhere. And then she came back and did another one in July. There were some greens and some yellows and still some reds. Well, as a part of that document, there was supposed to be an administration or immunity response to her things. So that report has been completed by myself and the team, and we'll be presenting it to the executive team here shortly, and then we'll make that available to everybody. But it goes through maybe a dozen points that she brought up, and it says, okay, here's your problem, what are you going to do about it, and what's your time frame, and who's responsible for it. So it's my response, but it's the Muni's response to her concerns, so that everyone knows this is what was brought to the attention, and we're not just turning a blind eye to it, but we have a plan to be able to rectify that. So that particular audit document is, we finalize it. I'm just working through a process, but eventually it'll be released to, and we actually are getting a lot of people, actually municipal employees are reading it in there. It says, well, where's this report? And they've actually been emailing us saying, hey, I want to see what you're supposed to be doing. So I've actually been very impressed with the Muni staff that have been calling, looking for that particular document, and we'll obviously release it, and Zig will have a copy of that as well when that one comes out. But that's that particular document.
Any questions? Okay, please continue.
All right, so that's the gate check. Let's talk about realization to go live. So while all this is going on and we're doing things, fortunately I had SAP start on the first day we went into blueprinting, and we never would have had this, but they are in the process of preparing an entire proposal, I guess would be the terminology, of from March 1st, which is realization, to July 1st, 2017, go live. And what it's going to take to get the system to turn on at that point. And it's broken down into configuring the system, so taking that blueprint. Now you have to understand, if we were doing it from scratch, they'd be taking the blueprinting and configuring a system from brand new. Never done before. That is not the case. We have a configured system that's been through Black and Beach configuration, and Peloton configuration, and all sorts of configurations. So they're going to be taking the blueprint on every item and saying, is that what's been configured? If it has, good, move on to the next one. If the next one says, no, that's not been configured, then they have to fix it. Because that report that was done in January listed 600 and some problems. Well, that means that something needed to be fixed in the system that's already been configured. So these blueprint documents are matched up. So there's a 26 to 28 week schedule where whoever's going to be doing that work, SAP or a third party, is going to be configuring our system to the blueprint that's done. Then you start going into testing, just like they did before, and there's Muni testing and all these kind of things. So there's different timelines all the way through the process. But the proposal is going to come through is going to be from that March 1st date all the way to the end. And there's a variety of different streams there. And I know Zig's been talking, for example, on ECM. That's something that wasn't in scope before. Well, there'll be a stream on, here's what it would take to get ECM included into the SAP plan. You have to understand, that's a brand new thing that was never in the scope to begin with, that we have to make a decision. Do we want to plan for that? And do we want to pay for the unfortunate cost that is associated with that?
Can you remind us what ECM stands for?
Electronic Content Management. It's basically your documents and where they go. And that was a gap that was missing. Well, every one of those streams, we're going to have an individual 4 to 10 page, I want detail. I'm not going to come forward with anything that says we want $5 million and it includes everything. I want to be something that says we've got 500,000 and it's for this, and here's what's going to happen, here's what's going to do, here's the benefit, the pros, the cons. So every individual one of those things. Now it'll roll up to the total, but it's not going to be a total number that you're going to have to be able to look at. And obviously I'll have to present to the administration and they'll figure out what they want. But that information will be available, obviously, to the assembly as well. I assume work sessions is how that gets. I haven't been through that process before, but I think that's the process. So that people can actually see the individual components of how much money and they're all going to have timelines and all have resources and all those kind of things. So SAP's been working on it, and there's probably a dozen of those individual streams that we have to do: data warehousing and testing and Philo and HCM and ECM and change management. Testing, and all of those things are there. And travel's another one, and hardware, as you mentioned, for computers, but there's also hardware for servers and licenses for certain types of things that are unfortunately all part of this rolled up. And I'm a big detail person. I don't want to hide anything, so it's going to be there. And at that point in time, we'll be able to decide scale, scope, cost, timeline, and all those kind of things, and be able to go through that. So I would anticipate for my purposes, you won't be seeing it for a while, obviously, but I've been shooting for the week of the 30th for them to have all of the detail on those streams done for me, so that we can start internally going through, are their assumptions correct? Do they have all the scale, the scope? And then we got to start talking, what do we really want? What do we need? And as Zig has certainly been mentioning, there's a pretty substantial financial amount here. So at that process, that's where we would begin to negotiate with SAP as our first choice to see if we can reach agreement on that. And those dialogue and those assumptions and all those things are going to go on for quite a while. If we reach a point where we cannot reach what is determined to be an acceptable amount for the work to be performed at the scale, then we would go forward at that point and prepare an RFP and put it out in, not get Black and Beach, but be able to put it out there. Now, please understand, however, I don't anticipate us to have, it'll be in the January timeframe before we know whether SAP is going to be there. And if we have to put it out for RFP, I'll have a system and blueprinting on March 1st, but if we have to work through that process, and I know you all are aware of, it has an impact on our end to go live, because we're going to have to work through that whole process before we hand them, some new vendor, the blueprinting and that system ready to go. And then we'd have to go through there. But that's the timeline and the process, but the amount of work that's been prepared to put into this detail, we've been on for several months now, and I'm a detail person, as you all know, and we're gonna look at everything very aggressively as we go through here. But that's the realization to go live, and that's the big unknown that's out there of that's to complete the project, basically. Because right now we're just talking blueprinting and the HANA-HEC AMS, which has all been encapsulated in the $49.2 million that's already been allocated, appropriated. This is the rest.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Mr. Training?
Alden, on SAP as an integrator, if you cannot reach agreement and you're gonna have to go out for a contractor for another implementer, I wanna know where they've been successful at, where they've not been successful. I wanna know cities that they worked on across the United States. I intend to call them. Otherwise, I'm only one vote on the side. I'm not gonna let it get through if I'm not comfortable in their ability to implement.
Any other one that whoever applies or is awarded.
Other thing would be, there's a bookkeeping module. And Zeg was telling us that it was not scheduled to be implemented.
Budget.
Budget.
The budgeting module.
So are we now scheduling the budgeting module to be implemented?
So this is one of the 9 decisions that I have to get the administration to buy off on. Right now, only 2 have been done, which is HANA and HEC AMS. Those are combined into 2. I've got 2 more I'll talk about here shortly. But a part of one of those 9 was the budgeting module. It will be my recommendation, and we've talked about it. I don't say I have a formal buy-off by the executive, that the budgeting module, which we have purchased the license for that particular module, we need to keep our scale and our scope on HCM and Filo right now, because the moment we're already trying to maybe thinking about adding ECM to it, and we've got data warehousing and time management with Kronos potentially. It's a lot, and it'll be my recommendation that we focus our over efforts on that to try to be successful, turn it on. Then yes, the 2017, 18, 19, whatever it happens to be, there will have to be a determination of planning, but money, work. It's probably going to take 9 to 12 months, I've heard, to be able to do the budgeting. But it is my recommendation, it will not be a part of us to go live until the more I add, the less likely we're going to be successful, and we are going to be successful. And the budgeting thing no work has been done on that, and it's just another side component. You have to have the accounting piece up, because that numbers feed into budgeting anyway. So even if you did plan for it, you still couldn't bring it live at the same time period to be able to do that. But we have the license for the budgeting module, but we are not doing any work at all towards that endeavor, would be my recommendation all the way through July of 2017.
How much do we pay for the license?
I don't know the answer to that.
Just at the next meeting, would you just give me a little email, or send me an email? I'd just like to know how much you paid for it and when it was purchased.
I know
That expect us
a
to
part of the
if we get
original
it,
module.
I want to know why we're not using it. You said why, but
I think they had like
how much
19
money they spent?
modules they bought, and budget happened to be one of the modules.
Anything else, Mr.
No,
Training?
thank you.
That was my question, one of my questions. Question, Ms. Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alden, I gotta tell you, it's refreshing. I love your positive attitude, and you're just adamant it's gonna happen. I like that. And
I never
like
fail.
I really do appreciate how you presented today, because it's more my speed. But I have a couple of questions. And the first comment, I'm 100% with you. I think in a complicated implementation like this, the less variables, the more chance of success. So, you know, let's do the basics, get them up and working, and then talk about the other stuff. That's my own opinion. I'm just one vote, like Mr. Trainee says, but I'm a very opinionated one
Vocal
vote.
vote.
Yes, I
Very
am.
vocal opinion.
Yes, I am. I am both vocal and opinionated.
I'm still surprised after the under 40 comment that you haven't gotten over that one.
I'm gonna ring the bell. and
She's
say
the only
time's up.
one we have that's under 40, I think.
Yeah, I am.
But we,
How long is that gonna continue?
Well, I'm 39 now, so next year.
you'll be 39 again.
Yeah, oh, yeah, no, next year, I'm so excited to be 40. But I have a couple of questions, and you're just gonna have to re-educate me a little bit, because it's not coming
I'm
to you,
getting
about the
scared.
budget.
About the budget?
About the budget. So, Lance and I have been talking about, these SAP positions that have been moved originally from the capital budget to the operating budget, now they're being moved back. And, he's not prepared, I'm not gonna put on the record what he told me today, because he's still verifying what happened and rationale. But as we're moving in positions and we're starting to capitalize things, like how is that working? Like, what are we doing with the amounts that we're expending that we're having to start?
Okay, and I think that I'm going to dovetail this a little bit back to a question that Mr. Trainee had beforehand. One of the things that I just did is gone through all of the things all the vendors that had been encumbered, where money had been encumbered, and we went through vendor by vendor and analyzed, do we have any plans to using them anymore? Because if there's some that's still not that's still out, and I maybe not be using the right terminology, but that was approved, but we spent so much and there's still some left over in that particular amount. Do we have any belief that we're going to use them again for any? And if it was no, we disencumbered it and we're putting the money back into the pool again so we can use it for the ones that we are. So
The pool of that
49.2 million, that's correct. So that's the capital pool, but throughout this entire project, you have given money for different vendors. RDI, I think, is one of them, for example, to do a certain amount of work. And there's actually a list of, it's like 2 pages of all these different vendors that have been involved from this very beginning in there. And we went through, and anyone that still had money left that could be used, we said, are we going to need it or not going to need it? Because if we're not going to need it, we need it somewhere else. Because we're not going to ask for more money for somewhere else if we still have some money here that's already been allocated. So I've already gone through that entire list, and wherever possible, the one exception was Gardner. I was going to take it out, but then every time I think about doing that, somebody said, well, can we use Gardner to do something? I'm thinking, well, maybe I just better leave that one alone and keep it out there. We don't currently have anything planned with Gardner, but rather than then, if I took it out, then I'd have to come back and ask for it later. So that one's still in there. But wherever possible, I've put the money back into the pool that's out there so that we have it available. We're not always asking for it, but we have the 49.2 million out there. I'm going to give you a little bit of that is Lance's area. So, we have, it's my anticipation that there are certainly, for example, I'm full-time charged to the SAP project. I'm 100%. But we also have needs for backfill positions that haven't been filled yet, that as we get through testing in some of these areas, that certain supervisors are going to have to be able to, because those positions were budgeted, but they were never filled this year because the system never went forward to be able to do that. I believe that they took those backfill positions out, and that's how they did the police extra type thing. And that's where it's getting a little bit confusing. So they currently have, I think, $2 million in operating and $2 million in capital of the positions, because we're going to need about $4 million of muni resources over the next year to muni time, I guess is the better way of saying it. To labor to be able to handle all these different phases and all those kind of things. But they switched the way they were in the past this year to handle this particular movement, and I think that's what your question is. And I'm really not the person to be able to explain why the budgeting department did that move. But what I have been told is that there's still, through the different budgeting processes, if we find that we need more people to be capitalized versus out of the operator, not as many, the first quarter revision, I think I've heard that terminology come up, that there's avenues available to adjust that, but on a total level, that we believe we have enough to cover through capital and or operating the resources needed. But where they're exactly allocated right now and how they go through the year, there may not be in the right bucket, but there's resources available to adjust as time goes on to be able to do that.
Well,
And that's what budget kind of did, and it's.
Well, and those are the questions I'm trying to get answers to.
Does that
because-
sound, do I sound
because,
semi-logical? 'Cause that's
Yeah,
what it's
in
called.
accounting generally, you don't put, operating positions, you don't usually put staff and capital budgets. And I know the last administration had reasons why they pulled them out of the capital and put them in the operating, and we don't have a definitive answer yet. I haven't gone to find the fiscal note of those 12 backfill positions that have been eliminated from the operating budget. But I did find the fiscal note for the 16 positions, and you're right, it's just over $2 million that's been moved from the operating budget to the capital budget. And then going forward, if we need municipal employees to do this, I mean, that's why I have to understand how it's being capitalized and what's happening, because I don't want us to get ourselves in trouble. So that's something that, I know Lance is aware that I'm concerned about. It may be helpful for you two to have the conversation to help put it in a way that Amy can understand it.
We've had, and I'm on the same boat as you, is we weren't the ones who made the decision on how to do that. That was done from a budgeting perspective. And then I'm even struggling myself to understand how and why and what are the nuances of being able to move
Well,
things
my
around.
hope is if they can put it in English for you, I might be able to understand it, so that would be helpful. But moving forward to the SAP contract, the one that is not budgeted yet, do you have the answer on that, what their anticipated funding mechanism is going to be for that? Because that money is not appropriated yet. How are we going to finance it?
I do not know that answer. I know they've done through the master lease agreements. I think to get up to the 49, there's been a variety of different things. I do not know how that, I think that would probably be through the CFO's office to identify the additional funding that would have to take place. We don't know what the number is yet, and I don't know if that determines what avenues they might have available to them.
I'm sure it will.
But
And
that,
when they bring the ordinance before us for appropriation, or the resolution for appropriation, the fiscal note will be on there, but, I'm looking out, and I'm considering in my mind from conversations we've had with our independent auditor, what potentially could be the cost, and, it would be kind of nice when we're budgeting if we have an idea in our mind what the funding mechanism is. So if you could pass that along to them, that even if they're not telling us the specific amount, give us a clue, that would be helpful for me.
I have the amount, and it's right in here. The funding mechanism of how to fund that amount, that's the part I was referring to. I don't know how we would do that. The amount that's in here, I don't want to have come out here as we talked about before, because we haven't even begun the negotiation part, but it's a lot.
No, I understand that, and I'm anticipating a significant fiscal note. But with that said, everything's about how you're going to pay for it.
I agree.
I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. So it's important to me.
And I'm unaware of the different funding sources available to go from 49 up to that next number. What different types of mechanisms are available, and they might do a mixture of those too. I don't know.
Well, I certainly, during the budget process, during the assembly meeting, I certainly will be very consistent with Mr. Harris that I get the answer.
I'm hoping that through the work session process, that those discussions take place, that it doesn't get to be a surprise by the time it.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm
That's my
telling
hope.
you now, because he had airplanes, so I'm telling you now, so when you guys talk, you can say, hey, by the way, Amy's gonna keep asking
I
about
thought, the credit union here, just to go get a department.
See, I'm paying him a
Charge.
and M&M's, right? All right, well, I appreciate the comments. I'm sorry I can't stay for the rest of the meeting. I have to go bring my car to the shop.
I have two really good things coming up.
Do you? Oh, so you're killing me, okay.
I don't know if there are any other questions.
Awesome.
Anything
I'll wait
else?
till you see
Two
most of
other
it.
things. Anything else right now? Okay.
All right, well, I wanted to give just, these are more status updates, and I'll try to be very quick. So ECM, I know that Zig's brought that up a couple of times. That is one of the 9 decisions I'm scheduled to, my plan is currently to present that to the administration or the executive steering committee on the week of the 30th. That's my goal of that one. That's the week after Thanksgiving for their consideration on whether, now there's a cost and a time and all those kind of things that go with that, but that's where that particular decision, but I wanted to bring that up because I know Zig brings it up every single time. The big decision is the time management decision, and I'm presenting that to the administration on Wednesday next week. So that's one that involves clocks and clocking in and Chronos and SAP versus Chronos and utilities, whether they're going to clock, and police and fire and what the it's a huge inclusive thing on not only time collection and time interpretation, but also some policy things that of whether we're going to ask people, employees, to do certain things. And whenever you do that, it'll start getting out. And if somebody's never had to clock, just as you went through with Chronos before, and all the people, we have, police, fire, and the two utilities do not currently clock.
Right.
And I will be making a recommendation to the administration with regards to those four. And because all of those decisions have to be made because they have to be blueprinted, and then they have to be programmed and configured. And we also have to spend a year and a half talking to the unions and making sure, as Mr. Steele knows, we got to make sure that we're communicative and we don't spring things on them. So there's a whole political side of this that goes with that. But time management, which has been on the hold for 4 years, and nobody wanted to make a decision. It's been holding up the entire system and the entire process. I've committed to present that to the administration on Wednesday, hopefully next week, and then we'll have the Thanksgiving week, and then the ECM one will come right after that. And those are the two major decisions that are of the 9 that need to be done now, so they affect blueprinting and making sure that those get taken into consideration. So
Mr. Train had a quick question.
Holden, when you take this to the executive steering committee, you might want to consider bringing it to this body, because other times the administration has brought Chronos to us and somebody's turned it down. So I'm trying to tell you politely is, the executive steering committee may decide they want to use Chronos, they may want to have some sort of timekeeping, but you may have trouble getting it through the assembly.
I second that.
It's not just a decision to be made by the executive steering committee without coming to the assembly. Because we have some decided opinions on the type of a system. Just to let you know.
And thank you, Mr. Trainee. If I can follow up on Mr. Trainee's comment just now.
So do I.
We had a document before us for timekeeping for MLMP, and we didn't approve it. Ms. Johnson, did you want to talk now?
Are you finished?
Those are actually all my topics. So
Oh, great,
if Mr.
okay.
Nabosky wants to go, we can come back to your particular question.
So, Ms. Johnston.
Some of it you've answered, but, I'm happy about your real aggressive
Normally I just keep talking. So.
I know how to cut you off.
February and March deadline. And I was just wondering, this management-wise, are you, the functional steering committee, is that meeting on a regular basis? Or, how are you keeping all this on track?
Okay, well, there's a variety of committees. Remember, there's the executive steering committee, and we had not met at all. And then when we did Hanahek and AMS, we met 5 times in 1 week.
Yeah.
So, and we've met a couple of times on it. So the executive steering committee is actually meeting much more often, and we've been meeting weekly on the functional steering committee. However, today we canceled it because when we had the holiday yesterday, and that was also, it can't be in 2 places at the same time, so it actually is occurring right now. But we are scheduled next week for the functional steering committee to go over the ECM document in advance of presenting to the executives. So we are, in addition to that, I know Zig has been talking about having PMO meetings as well, and those have never been having. I know there's a maybe misunderstanding of what one person thinks of PMO meeting versus another, but I can tell you that we have weekly, we have it at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, which was yesterday, which I was working. Where all the consultants and all the leads come together and we have a huge meeting, and then there are also side meetings or other meetings during the week where the functional leads are meeting with the program manager and having those. So those discussions are certainly happening as well. We are actively looking at the program charter, and I was given a little bit of a history on that. When we originally started several years ago, the program charter is basically from beginning to end, what are we trying to accomplish and what we're going to do. But I was told that they did a modified one this January where they were only saying what was the program charter just to get through blueprinting. Well, I want to look at the big picture.
Yeah,
So
no.
we're actually, we're actually scrapping the program charter that was just done for January through now. And I actually saw a draft of the new program charter, which is not only from now until go live, you know, because this is the project, and I don't know what happens to me after go live. I'm more concerned about what happens to the municipality and the system after go live. So we're putting in this charter. What am I going to do, not only to get this system on, but what am I going to do to make sure we have the staff, the resources, and everything else to move on after I'm gone down the road, to be able to do that, because I'm not going to leave a project, my project, handing that we just like we have no computer to run it on. I don't want it, we have nobody to operate it because nobody has been trained and being able to do that. So the program charter is not only looking at from now until go live, but also what do we need to start putting in place now to start developing the resources to make it a successful thing. Because go live is that's nothing. That's just to turn it on. Using the system and preparing for the future is what is actually the bigger part of this entire process. And there really has been very little discussion and thought into that, because everybody's been focused on how do I get it to turn on, not how am I going to use it afterwards. So wherever possible, I'm trying to get all the teams and change management and everybody thinking about, yeah, we need to go live and we're going to turn this thing on, but we got to maintain it, use it, make it more fit. That's the whole point of this thing, is to spend all this money and be able to get a value out of it. So we're really trying to incorporate that. So the program charter is going to be, and I would assume the assembly might be interested in what the program charter, when we're finished with it, the new one that's going to be out there, but we are working on that.
Thank you. Mr. Bosky and.
Oh, I just had a bunch of.
Oh, you're not done yet?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry.
I'll be briefer. I know Albie's cutting me off.
You know, one of the issues we've had in the past is sort of the hurry up and wait. And so we've had, you know, our consultants are here, and then we have and it's not just backfill, we just community. So are you do you feel like you're managing that at this time? Have you got, and I'm not asking you to have meetings for the sake of meetings. I'm just sort of saying, you know, what do you have in place to manage our part of the contract?
Yeah, the community resources are always a concern. We've got, and when we had a pause and people leaving and so forth, we've been working on making sure the people we've identified are the true people that are being identified. We've also been working on trying to identify throughout this process, where do we need the community people? So that's what goes back to the backfill question. We have to be able to say, I need that person on these months for this amount of time. And we haven't been able to say that before, because they may be able to do it during that period, but maybe 2 months later that was the CAFR and they can't do it. And until we provide the community resources the timeline and what the allocations are, it's very difficult for them to know whether they can do it with their existing staff or whether they need somebody else to be able to backfill those kind of things. So I would say I'm not where I want to be on that particular aspect. I think we got the consultants back, and we're hoping they're working with the people to move through there. But I think we have a ways to go to try to get that community involvement, the community excitement, the community morale in that area. And from a communication standpoint, that's not where we want it to be at this point. We have some work to do on that.
Thank you. And as you're working on the coming up with the SAP or hopefully
The big thing, I call it just the big thing.
One of the concerns I had in the last 6 to 8 months was just sort of the work plan where consultants they could only work when they were here. And if we're using consultants and they're coming and going, are you going to provide some flexibility within your so I mean, we just want an end project.
I have the same goal, and I'm a pretty rigid person, and every day I get them a little bit more flexible with the consultants that are out there. They're almost like all mercenaries, because they're all individual people coming in here. So we have a 2-in-1 right now, which is what I've authorized, which is 2 weeks on site, 1 week off site. They're working. They're always working. It's just whether they're on site or not. So we're at 2-in-1. We've had people do 3-in-1 because I'm very supportive of that, and we've had some people want to do 4 and 2s, and they can do that. What we have not been supportive of is a 2 and a 2. And we need, especially during blueprinting, we need the people here to talk to people. But with that, and I know it's been in Zig's presentations, and this may be where you're coming from, what I did do is we did not allow people, we weren't only paying 1 plane ticket over that 2-week period. What I have allowed them is that we will pay for them to go back during the weekend in the middle with the plane ticket up to a certain amount, because we're going to save the hotel room, their per diem, and rental car, and it was an offset. So I caved a little bit because the net for the muni was the same cost, but it basically almost made it a week-to-week kind of thing, because they could be here for 410s and then go home for the 3 days and then come back for their 410s. Rather than the perception of a 2-in-1 was kind of eliminated, and it became more of a 1 week kind of a thing. And I mitigated the cost to ensure that we didn't have any additional cost from the airline by not having to pay the other part of that. But my hope is that flexibility will gets us a higher quality person, but also will make them want to come here in January, which has been and people don't forget the consultants that we have here. This is not blueprint. A lot of these consultants will stick with us all the way through. So we're just talking about getting them to March, but many of these key ones will be in their realization and testing and scripts and be dealing with us. So we want a good consultant who wants to be here for a long period of time, not just a couple of months.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna help Ms. Dombowski. I mean, back when we were talking about capitalization versus operation, I always thought we should capitalize as much as possible. And I think training is one of those that you have to put into operations, but it's really your auditors that will be driving that decision. Thank you.
GASB 51.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. My name is Johnson. Mr. Bosky.
That's very helpful, Jennifer, because I remember there was something, but I can't remember specifically which parts you can and you can't.
And that's why you saw the third one that you pulled, the last one on Tuesday night, the HEC one. That is the off-site hosting. There's no actual product that we're getting from that, so it can't be capitalized and it can't be taken out of the 49.2 because there's no asset. You're using somebody else's servers and stuff. You don't get you don't get anything for it. So that had to come out of operating, which was your question. But that's why that one was different than the other two, because the other ones were actually getting a product that we could capitalize.
That's helpful, and I think, I'm not an accountant.
You play one on TV?
I've seen a Holiday Inn Express for not very long. But and I think it's helpful for assembly members to have these conversations and just to remind them of those little tiny nuances, because to me it matters. Quite frankly, I had a question. Oh, I remember what it was. So since Mr. Trainee brought up timekeeping, and I'm sure you're aware, but I just can't help myself. I have to just make sure to say it again. Part of the issue with the timekeeping portion, especially with AFD, telestaff, teledriver, all of those, is there really was Kronos didn't speak to, those two things. Yeah, so they talk forever about building a bridge between telestaff, teledriver, and SAP and all this stuff. So
and that's a part of my presentation on Wednesday is those two things.
It's another variable that's been incredibly unsuccessful, and in my view, scrap it. That's just I'm just one vocal.
But as you bring up those two things, those are, as I mentioned, there's a dozen to 15 things, and teledriver and telestaff are part of that I have to put in that Wednesday night.
I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Trainee.
Just that we bought the SAP, we bought the SAP version of timekeeping. So,
We have the time management module. We certainly have paid for that.
just want to make sure, if you're not going to use it, I want to know why.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. I have some comments, questions. I agree with both of you. I'd like to see, I've been an advocate along with Mr. Bosky and Mr. Trainee to get rid of Kronos. So I'll just say that. So Tom Dale is gone.
Tom Dale did not come back, that is correct.
Okay.
And Umberto, who was the HCM one, also his last day was last Friday.
Right. And you talked about, SAP negotiating with them, but I felt confident that it's going to work out. Yeah. I don't have a crystal ball, but I really just think that at this point, they're going to do the right thing on our behalf. Okay, and then I love the fact that you're detail oriented, because so am I, and you probably have a really clean card. And
How about that?
I agree with the fact that we're dealing with the basis and not jumping on the budgeting part, because we have to get the system up and running, and that's first and foremost. And then you continue to talk, and you should, about the 49.2 million, but remember, most of that was spent already. So, yeah.
But we-
30, I think 34, we
No.
spent maybe more than that now, what we did on Tuesday.
I've been using 37 as my number when we did but we're probably closer to 38 because we've had about a month of blueprinting that's been going on.
38 that we've spent, or we have left?
No, we spent.
That's what I thought,
That's
I forgot my mind is not.
Out of the
quite
49,
clear.
and you just approved another 3 million for AMS and 240 something for HANA, I believe it was. So that goes towards that 49.2.
Right, and I have one more question, and then I'm gonna ask Zig if he has anything he wants to say. But did I hear you say that the go live the window is between March and July 2017?
Right now, the go live that I'm targeting is July 1st of 2017.
So I heard you mention March to July, so what was that about?
Well,
And just briefly, because
well, the March I'm using is March of 2016, which is to get the HANA Heck AMS thing done and blueprinting.
Gotcha.
That's that particular time period. Then I mentioned some realization and
Gotcha.
testing and so forth, but all of those, it's a 56, from March 1st, it's 56 weeks, and I'm giving you some of the details. It's 56 weeks from realization to go live, assuming not one problem, which puts you into
I'm an
around,
optimist like you, so we're gonna get.
which
So-
gives me 2 months into 17 to a little bit of fluff or slough or however you want to use it to try to make it done. It will not be ready to go until April, May of that year at the minimum, and then I've got a little bit, so July of 17 is where I'm targeting.
So I'm a very optimistic person. I see the glass half full always. And so, with that said, what do you think the chances are of it going live in April 2017? You guys feel me?
If you want to go live before you.
I want to be here when it goes live.
What I have been told is we can't because of the there's some accounting things, the CAFR and everything is going right in that
And I'm sure
particular
you
time
want to be
period.
here too, Jennifer.
Right now.
I just thought I'd throw that out. I'll just have to come back, and I will.
Understand that my 2 overriding things that I hear is risk mitigation and timeline. Those are my top 2 things in every decision that I make a look at, I want whatever the least amount of risk, because you've already been through that has the least impact on delaying the timeline. Because you have to remember, I don't know how long PeopleSoft could die today.
Right.
The
Right.
longer you go, the more that chance
Right.
happens.
In reality is, I was just being
I know.
facetious
0.
because, no, I want it to go live when it's ready to go live.
It won't be by
Mr.
April.
I 100% support Mr. Jackson's last statement. You know, I don't want to see you rush it just to hit some artificial deadline. I want it to be done right, and I want it to be done, I don't want it to be done in 10 years, but I want it to be done right. And if that means sometimes it slips a month or whatever, I think that 2 months buffer that you've built in is probably a smart move. But I'm not one of these that, it has to be ready, that I want it to be right. This is a lot of money, and we've had a lot of problems, and
I get pushed a lot by people saying, well, if Philo's ready to go before HCM, will you do a split implementation? And I said, you know what, let me worry about it when I get to that part.
yeah.
We're too far away from it right now, but that's a good decision, a good problem to have at the
We'd
back
like it
end.
to work.
Set yourself up for
Not-
success, not failure. Set yourself up for success.
Thank you, Mr. Boston, Mr. Training.
Hold on, one last thing, getting back to Kronos. I can't release it, sorry. As I understand the Kronos version, not everyone's compatible with the version of SAP you're using. And you'll have a hell of a time getting it to assembly. If in fact we see something coming in front of us to add more money to Kronos, because you've got to update its system to conform with the new version of SAP 7, I believe. Just to let you know.
And you would support that or not support that?
I will try and kill it dead as fast as I can. There's a demoralizing factor to the timekeeping system they were trying to do. I don't want to do that.
Four more and we're there.
So, I'll shut up.
I'm not allowed to speak about Cronus in the public forum at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Training. Zig, do you have any comments?
That's wise.
Just a couple. I am hopeful that Alden will be able to get a very reasonable reconciliation of the inventories and listings, if you will, of the various documents for the blueprint, because there is a change in terms of how they're going to be counting them and how they're going to be tracking them, and I think that reconciliation would be very, very helpful. I certainly agree with Alden that the Executive Steering Committee needs to move forward with its decisions on time management and as well as ECM, so that folks can get that stuff taken care of in the blueprint. I do think that the organization needs to consider at least including the blueprinting activity for a budget while they have got people doing blueprinting and have all the financial people oriented that way. That doesn't mean you have to do anything. You don't have to implement it. You can certainly put it off as a second or third stage way down the road in 2017 or 2018. But it would make some sense to do the design work. At least that's my thought. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. You want to respond to that?
Well, I don't, my question would be is whether we don't have any budget consultants, because that might be a whole, I mean, they are doing blueprinting, but they're not doing any blueprinting in the budget area. We'd have to probably resource. I don't think we have existing consultants who have, the consultants are very specific in what they're, I mean, literally, if you're doing grants, that's all you do. If you're doing FERC, that's all you do. You go FERC and accounts payable. It's very, very specific. So my guess is there's probably a budgeting one, and we don't have any of those currently, on staff as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from anybody?
And I
Okay.
appreciate this venue to be able to update everybody.
Thank you, so do we. Okay, meeting adjourned.